to Transcendental Transformation, the place where spirituality and transformation unite. Host Miss Raina imparts truth so that you can break through your limiting beliefs and evolve into a deeper consciousness. As you go about your day, remember, before every breakthrough, there is a breakdown. And now, let's start the show.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Transcendental Transformations. I'm your host, Miss Raina, and today is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. As always, we're coming live from the Sirius Star System studios right here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I hope all is well with everybody. Tomorrow is Mabon, and if you don't know what Mabon is, well, it is the fall equinox. That means there is half daylight, half night equally, and just like how we have a spring equinox, which is equally half day, half night, well, this is, and then I think tomorrow, yes, the next day after that is actually the start of fall, September 22nd. And that means that the nights from here on out start to get longer. And for you northerners, yes, more darkness. For us and down here in Florida and further south, the light lasts just a little bit longer than it does up north. And so it doesn't get too bad. So anyways, I hope you guys are having an amazing week so far. And speaking of fall and Mabon, I want to, this is the time of year that is perfect for taking the time to slow down, stop, relax, kind of enjoy the fruits of your personal harvest. And what I mean by that is not like an actual harvest. Hey, if you're a farmer, absolutely go ahead, enjoy that time, time down. But the summer is a very masculine energy. It is, it's time for where we go out and we spend a lot of energy and we're always going on trips and traveling and doing all different things. Well, this is the time that we start to slow down, as we're weaning now from masculine energy into the feminine energy, which is winter time. What we start to do is we need to slow down, take time for reflection, take time for rest, and really start to enjoy just, the moments of, because as we move into the feminine energy, as we know that this is the time that we use for reflection. And that's why, like during the winter season for people, yes, I know it's hard with the cabin fever. I get it. Trust me, I really do. But it's the time that we need to start looking at ourselves and saying, well, what is it that I have to work on? Because as we're going into this feminine energy, it's no longer time to really go out and be aggressive and go and do your things, because, as winter comes, it's time for us to kind of bear down and just kind of, work on things until spring starts to come on, and then we can really implement it in our life. So I hope that you guys are having an amazing month so far. I can't believe fall's here already. It seems like just the other day, like we just celebrated New Year's Eve from 2022. And it's just, it goes by way too fast. So, it's pumpkin season coming up soon. I'm excited because I can't wait to, Whole Foods is going to have some pumpkin muffins. And yes, I know I'm not really supposed to have them, but, I need to try 1 or 2 or 6 or 8, during that time and, pig out on it so I don't have to worry about the rest. But anyways, guys, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, D Live. And as always, the replays are on our Facebook group, Transcendental Transformation, and in the About section. All right, so let's get going because we got a lot of stuff to cover. Tonight's show, we are going to talk about eating disorders, and I figured I would touch on this topic because eating disorders is something that a lot of people don't talk about. You don't hear about this. You hear about heart disease and diabetes all the time, and with and, you see so many commercials with pharmaceuticals always tackling eczema and sleep disorders and asthma and everything like that. But this is something that is kind of is a very, first of all, a very deadly disease. It's a very quiet disease that a lot of people have, and you may not even know you have it, and you may have several traits of it or developing it. But the first thing I want to say before we get into that, if you feel that you or anybody has an eating disorder, please seek help. Please seek some medical professional. This is this disease or this disorder is very deadly, and it can cause people a lot of destruction that sometimes is just not fixable. So if you guys know anybody or you are thinking about it, there's several ways to contact people. You can contact the National Eating Disorder by 1-800-931-2237. You can even text them at the same number, or you can do the crisis hotline text, and you can text NEDA, NEDA, to 741-741. All right, so as that's being said, where does it come from? What does it do? We're going to cover some of the, most all the eating disorders, and we're going to go through them a little bit. We're kind of going to talk about what they are, the signs, the symptoms. And the reason why we do this is not to bore you guys with facts and everything, but, there's a lot of people that don't know vitamins and minerals and disorders and things. So we try to educate on this show as well. We try to, tell the facts and try to tell things, but we want to help you develop more of a well-rounded, because the more educated you are on the topic, the more you're able to get help or help somebody else, or recognize the signs and symptoms and maybe allow them to get the help that they need. And this is why it's so important for us to constantly go through it. I know sometimes it may be a little dry at times on certain shows, but it's important for us to really know this education. But before we get into all the boring stuff, I want to start getting into why people start having or developing these disorders. And the first and major reason why people start to develop these disorders are because it stems from self-confidence issues. That is probably the number one issue why it starts to happen. And when we have self-confidence issues, it really stems from and develops from a very early age, depending on how we are in our social interactions. So what that means is that as a child, depending on, if you're liked, if you're bullied, if you're, considered cool, if you're not, if you're a woman, if you're a man, if you're black, if you're white, depending on, because there's so many variables of why eating disorders develop. But when we start to be as a child, we don't recognize that depending on how our parents treat us, how our siblings treat us, how our friends treat us, it really all factors in. And a lot of times people, because, when we're a child, we have to remember the first 8 years of our lives are the most important in development. That is where the brain develops and locks on and really is conditioned and to the ideas of what you're going to believe as an adult. And whether they're true or not, that is those years that is going to happen. So if you're told lies constantly, or you're being shown something that may not be true, and you're developing and you're saying, hey, well, this might be true, this obviously is the way of life, and because this is what I experience over and over, so this must be true, I'm going to accept it. And then we start developing things like self-esteem issues, self-worth issues, lack of confidence, etc. And this is, and so eating disorders just don't happen overnight. It's not like somebody wakes up and says, oh, you know what? I have low self-esteem today, and because of that, I'm going to start, binge eating, or I'm going to start starving myself. I'm going to start purging. I'm going to start doing all these different things. And it really starts at the fundamental basics of our childhood. And so, like, if you're in school is the number is hugely impacts the way we are developed, not just by family, how our parents treat us, if they love us or not, or our siblings or anything, but school, because we spend so much time. And so people who are good at things, let's say sports, people who are pretty, guys, girls, or whatever, get treated differently than people that are. But people who are also, attractive also have a lot of times these disorders because they have to maintain this, and we're going to get into that. But if you're good at things and you're well liked as a child, and you're pampered and stuff, you're less likely to develop a eating disorder. But that doesn't mean that you won't, because there are some times that the pressure of this idea of being put on, well, I have to maintain this thing in order to be liked, sometimes puts the opposite pressure on us, and then we develop that way either. So it's not just always it's always roundabout the way of self-confidence or self-perception, or how our self-worth is, but they can come from many avenues. And this is why, we really have to start looking. So if we're starting to recognize, or we're dealing with an eating disorder, and you're watching this show, then what I suggest is, yes, go seek a medical professional, a therapist, somebody who can help you. But start to understand that all these things are being driven by ideas that you have of self-esteem, self-confidence, and a lot of times it's been brought up by family, how your upbringing, whether your parents got along, how they treat you, if you feel loved, depending on if you're the first child, middle child, end child. It kind of almost makes you like your headache, because you realize that there are so many variables into anything. And the reason why we have lack of or pressure feeling. I know as a child, I felt pressure of always being told that I'm going to, be, the prodigal child that's going to take over my father's business and, make it. And I was told that from the time I was in first grade. And it put a lot of pressure on me, because I didn't know. I mean, I was a child, and I would go to work all the time. I would ride on, the trucks, and yeah, I liked it, and it was fun and everything. But, there's always this pressure that I had, that I was going to be this idea from such a young age. And when and because I wasn't good at school, because of my dyslexia and my ADHD, and they didn't understand it, so I was a problem child, it really started to create these ideas of insecurities. And so this happens to a lot of people that, succumb to this type of disorder, because if our parents aren't getting along, if our relationships with our siblings aren't doing it, these ideas are vital, because they tell us our place. So if we're getting good grades and people are patting us on the back, maybe later we might develop pressure, because we think, oh, we got to maintain this. But if we see our siblings, doing this great and getting all this attention, and we're not, because we're not that student, or we're not that well liked, or we're not that athletic, and all the attention, then all of a sudden these things start to develop. Well, wow, that person's a winner. That person's, got it great. Look I wish I was my brother. I wish I was my sister. They got everything. I don't have anything. And it keeps going, because once we get into middle school, what starts to happen is we start to see the ideas of magazines, and we start to see the ideas of TV. I mean, even as a young child, we watch more things like Nickelodeon and PBS and different things like that try to boost self-esteem. But once we get into the real world, where we're constantly bombarded, where if you don't have a certain look, if you're not a size 2 or a size 0, and you don't have blonde hair, or you don't have, this curvy body, or you don't have these muscles, man, and you don't look like this, and you're not doing this, then, we start to constantly be told that. We constantly have to see that we have to fit this TV image. We have to fit this magazine image. We have to fit this societal image. And this is usually a lot of pressure. And even if you don't have an eating disorder, I guarantee you this idea is probably popped up into your head all the time, because a lot of us, like I used to work out, and I was always an athlete. I always did stuff, and I used to like it, but I used to work out like crazy, because I had a phobia, because my sister was overweight, my dad was overweight, and I would get teased for them. And I said, one thing I was never going to do is get overweight, because I don't want to, I'm already getting teased, and I'm not even the person and so I don't ever want to go. And so that would drive me, because the fear of being like that, was dictating my actual perception of life. And because I was afraid, because I was so young and I didn't know any better at the time, once I started getting older, I realized that I was, working out and doing all these things, and I'm like, why am I so obsessed with this? And I realized, wow, this has to stem from the past childhood. This has to stem from this idea that, I have to be this idea and image and that. And so I really suggest that we really take a look at how we're perceived in the world. What is our self-image? And I don't mean by how we're perceived by others. I mean, what is your perception of yourself? If you have insecurities, if you have low self-esteem, if you have these things, well, then why? Why do you have this? Where does it come from? Who does it come from? Who's in your head constantly telling you these ideas that don't need to be there? And I learned a long time ago that there was many people that was in my head. There was so many people, and I just don't mean the DID. I what I mean is there were so many people constantly telling me I wasn't good enough, that I need to be faster, better. I need to have these type of grades. I need to do this. I need to be successful. And that and it created this world. And I'm lucky enough to never really suffer from an eating disorder. Like I used to be healthy because I was afraid of something, but I never really got crazy with it. And for those of you who have succumbed to that type of idea, I know it's a hard struggle. I know eating any type of food, weight loss, eating disorders is very tough because food can be very addictive, and we need food. And this idea of constantly, especially if we're trying to avoid food or anything, this idea of constantly, I mean, there's food everywhere. I know there's commercials that use subliminal messages, and the moment you see the commercial, all of a sudden you want food. And it's hard because your body needs nutrients in order to do that. And yes, we're not solar eaters yet. We haven't developed that type of idea in our consciousness to just live off the sun. And so we need it. And so this is the way our world is. The whole world is food, and it's very hard. It's almost like people who are who suffer from alcoholism. There's a bar on every corner. There's bars everywhere. There's so it's in your face, and this is something that's very hard. Some of the traits that people that suffer from these disorders are people who are perfectionists. You find a lot of times that people who have eating disorders and also suffer from wanting to be perfect in life, they're perfectionism. They in their mind they learn that they have to be a specific way in order to be successful. In order to be liked, I have to be this way, and so everything has to be perfect in my life. Otherwise, what's going to happen is that I'm going to lose everything. And if things aren't perfect, well, and this is control. This is all about control, because I need to control my life in order to feel a specific way, because I lack the self-confidence, I lack the self-worth, I lack the appreciation of who I am. And so everything needs to be perfect for me to be stable in life. The next thing I also see in a lot of people with eating disorders is being impulsive. People who are impulsive not suffer from this a lot of times because, again, it's sometimes people think, oh, it's just a craving. You were just craving it. Well, no, you're going towards something, and you want something, and you fight with it. And there's so many different ways. Impulsive people just don't always just do drugs or drink or anything like that. There's so many different things, shopping, shoplifting, eating disorders. There's so many different things that impulsive people do. I mean, I had a great friend that was very impulsive, and and sometimes it was fun because we'd be like, all right, let's go do this. But sometimes it was very destructive, because the idea means when you're impulsive, it comes from an idea of fear of being without. So a lot of times, like, if I don't do this now and I don't live life, and I don't get this now, and then I might be without. And I get that, because you kind of have this idea, well, you know what, life is so short. We don't know when our time is up. But this impulsiveness that we think that is going to, feed the need of what we're really missing, a lot of times is very destructive towards a lot of people. And if you're being neurotic is the other thing. A lot of times people with any type of neuroticism and everything like that, they go towards the idea of depression. They have a lot of self-doubt in them. They suffer from anxiety, indecisive thinking, and this all plays into the eating disorder, because if I'm a perfectionist, I'm impulsive, I'm a little neurotic, well, then that's going to be because I have no control over life, and the things that I can't control are going to annoy me or bug me until the point where I become depressed. And because I'm really not sure of myself, that's why I got to have everything perfect. I got to have everything my way. Then all of a sudden, what's really going on is I have self-doubt. I don't have the confidence in myself to realize that everything's going to play out. And this leads to indecisive thinking and going back and forth. And this creates a lot of mess. So I'm going to take a break here, because we're going to get into what the different types of eating disorders are, and we'll be right back after these messages from I Am Evolution.
The human experience is changing. and consciousness is evolving into something higher than any of us could ever imagine. As we transform into more sentient beings, a new world of connected consciousness is taking place. Welcome to I Am Evolution, the movement in human development that transforms the human experience into a deeper consciousness through perspective and duality. Are you ready to be a part of the next stage in human evolution? Call I Am Evolution today to schedule your appointment at 561 318 0006. That's 561 318 0006. Or email us at iamevolution@protonmail.com.
All right, everybody, we are back, and if you're just joining us, we are talking all about eating disorders. Before we actually get into it, the other thing that people with eating disorders has some of the characteristic traits, and the reason why I'm going through these is because I want people to understand if you don't have this and you suspect someone of having this, that doesn't mean someone that, is, someone that's impulsive has an eating disorder, or someone who's a perfectionist has it. But these are a lot of times the things that are linked in and connected with. Mood disorders is another one. People with mood disorders usually also have a poor body image due to the Western culture. They believe that they have to be a certain weight. They have different things, and a lot of times because, depending on what their, how their mood is and ever changing everything of whether I'm liked or loved or if I'm successful or not, then these type of ideas are always linked that. So these are just a few of the things that does that. When I was looking up stats, because I wanted to say, hey, let's give them some stat. Like, I want to know, like, is it really, because there are some things that affect black people more than white, and white people more than, Asian. So what, like, does eating disorders really affect, and who does it affect? Does it affect, and what I found out is it really doesn't matter on age, sex, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. It has nothing to do with that. As we were talking about self-esteem and our poor body, the way we look, self-perception, how we view ourselves, the confidence, etc. Those are the main characteristics. So I'm letting people know that it has nothing to do. This is not something where they say, oh, well, cancer affects this race more than this, or diabetes affects this race more than this, or it has nothing to do with this. This, to me, at least from what I know of it, it just seems like it's mostly a psychological type of disorder. In fact, that 9% of the world's population claims to have a eating disorder. 28.8 million Americans have experienced some type of eating disorder in their lifetime, and 6% of people with an eating disorder are diagnosed or just usually told that, oh, you're underweight. And a lot of times in hospitals, and doctors, they don't really recognize it because it's not something that it's one of the most deadly diseases. It really is, because there's so much that damage that eating disorders do to the body. But it's something that not a lot of doctors, recognize or that understand. And so a lot of time, eating disorders are excuse me. Excuse me, I'm losing my throat. But a lot of times that eating disorders are diagnosed as being underweight, or someone's just malnutritioned or whatever. But it is among one of the most deadliest mental illness diseases around here, second only to opioid overdoses. So that just shows you how deadly. So if you know somebody, excuse me, if you know somebody that may be suffering from this type of disorder, or might be getting into it, or maybe yourself, please, again, seek medical professional help, because the sad fact is that 26% of people with an eating disorder often attempt suicide. So and that's kind of high, people. That's very high. Mood disorders, it shows people that mood disorders has 89%. When it comes to children, they found out that children, even like I said, because remember, everything is into our childhood, that 35 to 57% of adolescent girls engage in crash dieting, fasting, self-induced vomiting, diet pills, or laxative. I know when I was young, this was very popular amongst my circle. My dyslexia is starting to kick in, so I apologize. but I knew that was part of my circle, and it was all over the TV. Oh yeah, get diet pills every if you want to be the one girl or the it girls, whatever they call it. I'm not too hip with all that stuff, but if you want to be the it girls, they take these diet pills all the time. And so this is brought on, this is taught to women, because women is at such a young age, girls are already taught that you have to be pretty, you have to do all these different things, and it's all about looks for women, because otherwise you're never going to find a man, you're never going to be successful, because et cetera, et cetera. And so I was kind of surprised that it was that really hot, or sorry, that really high. But when they showed that college was a 91% of women admitted to controlling their weight and dieting, which is very, very sad that we do that. Um, People of color and indigenous people, one of the things that I found fascinating but also kind of sad was that doctors, are less likely to ask someone who is of color or indigenous than someone who is white if they have an eating disorder. And again, I'm not going to get into why the reasons are, but that's the statistic that showed up on many different places, that black women and black people and indigenous people found that they weren't asked as much as white people. So teenagers also are more likely, 50% of teenagers are more likely than white people also to exhibit bulimic behaviors. And the LGBTQ, which I found, because I always want to go through that, gay men 7 times more likely to do binge eating, 12 times more likely to report than 12 times more likely to report than heterosexual males, and transgender college students 4 times the amount than cisgender classmates. So these are some stats that have been shown, and that's too high, people. Our society puts a lot of pressure on us to be perfect, to look a certain way. And I think it's really about time that we change this in society and really make it to where, you are who you are, and you got to love who you are. And if people aren't going to like you for who you are and appreciate you and not give you the time of day or credit, then that's the way it's going to be, okay, then move on to find people that do. I've had a life where I was, when I was younger, I was very good looking. I had a rock solid body. I got a lot of attention. And now that I'm older and I don't look like that anymore and I don't have the body, nobody calls. And the same people, if I run into them in the street or something, they act like, I got 6 heads on my shoulders all of a sudden. That's the way life is. And you know what? You got to learn to, that doesn't mean anything against you. It just means that that's on them. They're not good enough for you. And I had to realize that. I said, you know what? Yeah, that kind of hurts. That the same people who I used to hang out with all the time don't give me the time of day, but then they weren't really my friends. And again, that's not a knock on me, because you have to understand that really your life is about you. And when we have when we struggle with a challenge such as an eating disorder, and when we see stats this high based on your gender, your race, and just whether you're a male or a female or whatever, it's just sad the way our Western society, and this is just America, people. I don't know the rest of the world. I'm just talking about the USA, but our society does put a lot of pressure, and I think it's time that we really get to loving ourselves and building our self-esteem and confidence. So let's go over some of the eating disorders, and we're going to go over the first one, anorexia nervosa, which is which the definition is basically significant and persistent reduction in food intake leading to extremely low body weight. So the context is age, sex, and physical health. So this is a relentless pursuit of being thin and a distortion of body image. So these are the people that have the intense fear of I'm going to gain weight. They look in the mirror constantly. They're always looking. Oh, my arm is too fat. They could be the thinnest person in the world, but the way they look at their body is completely different, because their perception of their the way they look to themselves is totally different than the way we see them. And this is something that that's very hard to get out, because this is drilled into whoever's decided to take this on. This is someone who is very drilled into their head that they're not thin enough, or they're not going to be pretty unless they're super thin, and this is a very deadly disease. They see themselves often, like I said, they're overweight, especially when they're starved. They will starve themselves. You'll see them very nitpicky. They'll take a bite or two of something, and they'll say that's good for them, their day. They're severely malnourished. You can tell someone who's usually anorexic because they have abnormal blood counts, which means that they're usually low in red blood cells and things like that. They're very pale. They have a lot of eroded teeth. You see them very thin and brittle. You can always, like, almost skeleton-like, because they're always fatigued because they're not getting enough nutrition, and they have insomnia because when we're seriously underweight, we don't have that. Plus the psychological factors, we get a lot of times because they're malnourished, and because we have lack of blood, or we're anemic and everything like that. Then all of a sudden, dizziness and fainting due to low blood pressure. You'll see kind of like a bluish discoloration in their fingers. A lot of times, because again, this is all because they're malnourished. Real thin hair breaks out, falls out very easy. They just look really sick. It's, and I don't want to be unfair, but in my judgment, the way I look at it, when I've seen people with anorexia, I kind of see, compare. They kind of look similar to people who have like stage 4 cancer that are on their end of life. They have that very brittle, sickly look, and it's very noticeable, at least to me. And I kind of compare. I kind of see the comparison in that, and sometimes it's hard to do that. But you look at things like the bluish discoloration on their thing. If they have an absence, if they're a woman and they have an absence of menstruation, they have dry yellowish skin, irregular heartbeats, and that they don't have cancer. It's a good sign, people, that they might be doing something behind closed doors, because most eating disorders are done behind closed doors, where people aren't going to let you know what's going on, and they'll deny it. They'll say everything's fine. Or they'll say that they are eating, they're going to go eat, they hide, and then they come back. There's so many different types of signs that people do, and it's very well hidden. That's why a lot of people don't know, and it's not something you usually can test for, other than, like what I just mentioned. But dehydration and swelling of legs and arms are a big sign. That is something that someone with anorexia does have. The emotional behavior and symptoms. So if you're suspecting that somebody has, maybe anorexia, like I just said, they're severely restricting their food intake. You'll notice that they barely eat anything, or they're going to say they're going to go eat, and they're supposedly eating all this stuff, but you just see them constantly losing weight. You might find food being thrown out. A lot of times, sometimes they'll binge, and self-induced vomiting. This is gone, there's a lot of similar traits for all the types of eating disorders. So I'm going to go over some of them, and then a lot of these I'm going to skip later on, because they're the same things. So it doesn't matter if I'm talking about anorexia or purging or another one. I just want to, there are a lot of the symptoms and a lot of the emotional signs and physical signs are a lot of the same. But a lot of people who are trying to lose weight and with eating disorders are they usually induce some type of vomiting after a binging, or they don't eat, and or the little bit that they do eat, they use a lot of laxatives or enemas. They use diet aids. They use herbal products. I don't know too many herbal products that really clean you out. I mean, I know a couple, but laxatives and diet aids, especially in the Western world, are very popular. So if you see, sometimes, a lot of times you'll see people with eating disorders, they'll cook for other people because they don't want to really eat the food. Maybe they'll pick here and there, but not too much. Like, the whole goal to this is they don't want to eat, because remember, it doesn't matter. This finger is too fat. It's got too much fat. I need to make it smaller, even if there's nothing really on it. And so these type of ideas, you'll see that maybe they'll be cooking for a lot of people, but there's a lot of food, but they're not really eating them. They're often frequently skipping meals. They refuse to eat, and they always make up excuses why they couldn't eat. Maybe they'll say things like, well, that's not a safe food. And I get it because I have food allergies, and obviously, I don't, I love to eat, but they'll use excuses of why they can't eat the food. And that's sometimes, especially if you know that they don't have food allergies or anything like that, and you're starting to see there's various, they'll always eat things that they'll constantly read labels for checking fat calories or fats and calories in it constantly, and they always try to eat very low calorie food, very low fat. They spit, a lot of times they spit their food out after chewing, as I said before, lying about how much food they eat. And this is something that goes on constantly with a lot of people. You'll say, oh, no, I'll eat it. I ate it, I swear. And you'll find it in the garbage, or you'll find it, you'll catch them one time, maybe throwing it down the garbage disposal or disposing it in some way. Because remember, again, this is the fear of gaining weight. And so what they'll do is a big sign of somebody who does this is someone who's constantly measuring their body. They'll measure not only their waist, but they'll measure their legs, they'll measure their arms, they'll measure many different parts of their body. And so that's something that we look forward to. And also that they will complain, people with eating disorders constantly complain about being fat. They could be the most thin person in the world, but they're always complaining about being fat, and they're always irritable and can't sleep because of all the things that we were talking about earlier. The next one that I want to talk about is the avoidant restricted food intake disorder, and that was previously named it was selective eating disorder, and this is eating and feeding disturbance, usually continually, because they don't they just eat to meet the appropriate nutritional energy. A lot of times this is accompanied with significant weight loss, as I said before. Give me a second, guys. Hold on one second. Got a little dizzy spell there. I apologize for myself. I'm still working through my health as well. And I was trying to talk, and I started getting a little dizzy there just for a minute. But this also is accompanied, like I said, all these are accompanied by any type of nutritional deficiency. They depend on like things that they can feed through a tube or nutritional supplements. They're not often driven by a desire to lose weight or fear of gaining weight. So this is something that's a little different, but they struggle because they're overly sensitive to sensory foods like taste, smell, things like that. So this is a little different, where the other one was driven by fear of how much weight gaining or anything like this. This is something that's different, that's changed a little bit, because this is changed now to taste and smell and intense fear of unpleasant outcomes, maybe after eating it. I know that there are some foods that we all like and dislike that I know I can't stomach cream corn or olives at all. You get that near me, I am going to vomit every single time. But this is a little different. So this is somebody that that deals with this in a little bit different way. So again, the same physical symptoms. Again, with this one, yes, it's similar to anorexia in that way as far as deficiency, because anytime we're not intaking, or we're constantly intaking and then throwing up our food or refusing to eat a lot of foods, we're going to get that. But this one has a lot of stomach cramps. It's difficulty concentrating on things, because remember that the blood needs to rush to the brain. The blood has to supply the brain with a lot in order for it to function properly. So anytime there's a lack of blood, anytime there's low blood pressure, anytime there's a malnutrition of any sort, the first thing that's going to go is the brain and the concentration and sleep and things like that, because the brain can't function because it's not getting supplied. And of course, hormones, dizziness, fainting, as always. So what we look for in this one is you're only going to eat certain textured foods. They're going to show a lack of interest in foods, lack of appetite. They're going to have like a dramatic weight loss, thinning here. And the causes to this are, depending on their food beliefs, a lot of times anxiety, OCD, and things like that. All right, let me, let's take a break, because I want to run through these other two really quick, and then we'll be right back after these messages from I Am Evolution.
The human experience is changing, and consciousness is evolving into something higher than any of us could ever imagine. As we transform into more sentient beings, a new world of connected consciousness is taking place. Welcome to I Am Evolution, the movement in human development that transforms the human experience into a deeper consciousness through perspective and duality. Are you ready to be a part of the next stage in human evolution? Call I Am Evolution today to schedule your appointment at 561 318 0006. That's 561 318 0006. Or email us at iamevolution@protonmail.com.
All right, we are back, and if you're just joining us, we are for the third and final part of this show. I'm really hoping to get all through this, so I'm going to kind of go a little bit fast. Again, a lot of the same signs and symptoms for all eating disorders. So if you missed out on, I'm not going to talk about a lot of the same signs and symptoms. If you missed out on the previous ones, just go back and listen to them, and most of them apply for the same thing as well. But rumination disorder is repeatedly and unintentionally spitting up regurgitated, undigested, or partially digested food from stomach. They chew it and then swallow it or spit it out. I know before I've had that before, especially when I've eaten too much. The body has it, but this is a constant. This is a constant thing. A lot of times, this is misdiagnosed as just having. Upset stomach or acid reflux, but they don't really know. Like a lot of these, they don't really know what the causes are or why it has it. But most of the time they think, especially for this one, maybe it's an increased pressure in the abdominal area or like the stomach and things. But a lot of times, like I said, it is confused. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I'm having a couple dizzy spells today. I don't know. Just some days I have, like I said, some days where I'm okay, and other days, especially when I sit too long in a specific way, sometimes I just get that. So I apologize. But this is also frequently confused with things like bulimia, GERD, like I just said, gastro, just any type of stomach disorder a lot of times. So people. The signs and symptoms of this one are also unhealthy weight loss, malnutrition, because again, that things aren't being absorbed properly, things are being regurgitated, and a lot of times if they're spitting it back out, then they're not digesting it. Dental erosion, like I said, on a lot of these, especially purging and bulimia, things like that, things where people are constantly throwing up. You're going to see bad breath, eroded teeth, because again, the stomach acid has eroded the teeth. A lot of times they're going to feel embarrassed, and they're going to be socially isolated because they can't control what is going on, and this might be something where they don't want to eat in front of people. Another one is unspecified feeding or eating disorder. And this is an eating disorder that doesn't meet diagnostic criteria, like specifically like an eating disorder. When it doesn't fit the mold, a lot of times with people, they just kind of say, well, then it's, unspecified, because it's the same thing when people say, when doctors tell you it's genetic, when they say, oh, it's genetic, it's because they really don't have an answer for you. So they just tell you it's genetic because it's easier to accept. Oh, well, it's just genetic. It's out of my hands. We can't really do anything for you, because they don't know themselves. So this is one of the times where if you know somebody, or you don't fall under a certain category, or not yet, it hasn't developed, a lot of times they may diagnose you as that. But again, this is something that we see. It's, this is all about distress and social, how you view yourself a lot of times. And so the signs and symptoms will vary under this. This is a very vague one. I know I'm kind of being vague on this because there's really not a lot on this. It's kind of like you either fall in a bunch of these other ones, or if you fall in this, they really can't determine your actions yet, because maybe certain things haven't developed, or maybe it's not in their mind, not as dangerous or not as bad as they thought it was. But a lot of times you're going to see these different things. All right, so bulimia. Bulimia is a popular one that a lot of people know. This is when people secretly binge eat and they lose control of eating and they just eat, and all of a sudden then they go someplace and then they purge. They try to get rid of it because, hey, who wants all the extra calories and the fat and the sugars if I just went and I just ate 20 cupcakes because I starved myself all the time, or because I deny myself to have it in public and then I get it in and then I throw it up. Well, this is a lot of ways that people try to, not make sure that they're not getting the food. Again, the cause with this is unknown, but it's all emotional. It's all mental. It's all how we perceive ourselves. A lot of times, we have to look at, why we're doing it, because if we want to maintain a certain weight, but we're going to deny ourselves food until we can't control this craving anymore and we just have to have it, then we go on a binge. That's what a lot of times it's all about. It's about not being able to control a craving because you're so restricted to these ideas that you can't have this or you can't. You know what? I learned a long time ago that, when I was all fit, I looked good, but a lot of times I was miserable because I didn't allow myself anything. Now, obviously once I start working out again and I get healthy where I'm able to do that, I'm still going to eat very restrictive, but at the same time, I'm going to allow myself to have some fun and time for times. I'm going to allow myself some treats once in a while and, just kind of enjoy life because, we got to enjoy life. We got to be able to do these things, but I'm not going to be no longer, and I think you shouldn't either, to these places where, if you don't look a certain way, if you're with a partner or family or somebody that, then you don't need these people. You really don't, because to the point where somebody has to, secretly eat, something that they've been craving for a long time and throw it up because they're so afraid of gaining weight, because they're so preoccupied with the way their body looks and they're going to judge themselves, and because other people are judging themselves and all these preconceived flaws. It's just, we got to change our way of the way we look of our body image, and the way we get healthy is by eating healthy and moving and mentally and emotionally getting healthy as well. It's not just always going to the gym and eating, stocking our fridge with fruits and vegetables, but self-induced vomiting is a very unhealthy way and a very toxic way. It's very harsh on the body every time you vomit. All the acid comes up, it erodes the esophagus. It really does a lot of damage to your tongue and teeth and everything like that. And this is very, very, this is a very harsh way for you to lose weight. Also, people with bulimia, they all do, they all misuse laxatives, weight loss supplements, diuretics, enemas, things like that, because remember, it's all about getting rid of. These people who suffer bulimia are all kind of like where anorexia is more about being fat. Yes, it's a body image, but this is a different way, and it's just all about the way they look at their body and the dimensions of it. They also have a fear of gaining weight, but they're not looking at themselves where everything is skin and bone, to the point where they just want to maintain, what they have, and, without gaining that type of weight. And so this is something that you'll see people have repeated episodes of eating large amounts of things again and food in one sitting, or they'll go grab something and they'll go in their car and they'll eat and then they'll go and vomit it up by usually sticking fingers down their throat or finding some ways, or they'll take a bunch of weight control pills, laxative, things like that, so the body pushes out as fast as possible. But this is something that is one of the more deadly ones, and unfortunately for women and girls, this one is mostly geared towards women and girls because of the way society makes it. They're more likely to have it, especially in late teens and early adulthood. The risk factors for this, I read a lot of stuff that was saying that it's that biology, that genetic, that especially with eating disorders. And I got to be honest with you, I completely disagree. I very rarely see anything. And I know there's going to be a lot of you out there that believe in genetics and think that things are, but just from my education, just from my experience, just from the people I've worked with, just from all the things I've seen on hospice and everything, I don't really believe that things are genetic. I know some things can be, but things like this, every time I've talked to somebody or worked with somebody with an eating disorder, or I've worked with somebody with another, I've seen that it always has to deal with a self-image issue. Their self-esteem, their perception of themselves, the way they've been brought up, the way their parents treat them, the way their boyfriends or girlfriends treated them, etc. And men, I don't want to keep you out of this too, because there are men that suffer from this as well. But so I really don't really agree with genetics, and I think that's an excuse. And I apologize if you take that offensively, but I just believe that that's an excuse that people will say, oh, well, it's genetic, I have no control over it. I believe that we have more control over things that we believe that we do, but it's just the fact of working on ourselves, recognizing why we're doing the things we're doing, and be willing to work on those things instead of concerning ourselves, because we're concerning ourselves with things like body image when we should be concerning ourselves with working on ourselves to evolve to self-esteem, self-love, self-confidence, compassion towards ourselves, compassion towards other, and understanding, because those are the things that are going to change us. And that the word genetics, just like, oh, you can't do anything about it. And I believe that doctors should be able to give us a little bit more idea, and I hope that we're able to evolve to that. And that leads us to, why I say that a lot of people who have eating disorders should go see a professional psychologist, because a lot of these emotional issues, like I said, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, a toxic way of thinking about themselves, traumatic events, there's just a list that goes on. Even environmental stress, like how you react to the world around you, depending on where you're at, and how things, and even boredom. People, I know when I used to be a big partier, sometimes I would party just because I was bored. There was nothing else to do. And we have to be able to understand that these factors really do, psychological and emotional, all play into a lot of disorders, a lot of challenges that we face, because that's what makes us who we are, and that's what that's what puts us in those positions to have these challenges, because we're supposed to work through them and not just take pills in order to do this. But also people who diet. People who diet are more likely and a higher risk of developing an eating disorder, because they already have that mentality that I have to be a specific weight. I have to be able to do these things in order to, in order for people to like me, in order to get the attention. Instead of getting our own attention and being fine with who we are, we seek it through other ways. And a lot of times it's in a very toxic way. The last thing I want to talk about really quick because I know we only got a couple minutes. The last one I want to talk about is purging. Purging is similar to bulimia. It involves the purging behavior of throwing up after, to induce vomiting and to manipulate body shape. But the difference between bulimia is a serious eating disorder that often occurs after a cycle, like a binge eating behavior followed by a period of purging. Purging is just people who don't go on a binge, but will decide to throw it up anyways, because they don't want the calories, they don't want the weight, they don't want the fats or the sugars or whatever. They'll eat because they need to eat, and then feel guilty about it, and then throw it up because they don't want to gain the weight either. So this is again they self-induce vomiting, again laxatives, diet pills, etc., fasting, excessive exercise. You'll see people who do a lot of purging a lot of times do excessive exercising. Also, again, the emotion, and what causes, sometimes they're finding out what causes people to start purging is, disruptions to social, personal work life. They, again, fear of gaining weight, obsessed with losing weight, and self-esteem issues, as always. They also, purging, like I said, and any type of purging, when you throw up, it really, you'll start noticing tooth decay, because it wears down the enamel on the teeth, and this is something that's very harsh. Also, like I said before, the esophagus suffers, because every time you get heartburn, every time that acid comes up, it starts to erode all that. Your peristalsis doesn't work, and it just makes it very uncomfortable and very deadly. And a lot of times we think it's digestive. People will have similar symptoms to digestive issues, because you're constantly bringing up that acid. And one thing that people don't realize, that with a lot of eating disorders, besides the low blood pressure and the anemia and stuff like that, is you're more likely, especially with purging, to develop any type of cardiovascular system disease or disorder. And a lot of people don't realize that, yes, it can affect the heart too. Some of the signs that you'll see really quick are people that feel faint. You'll see their throat and facial swelling, irregular heartbeat, and other heart problems, pregnancy complications, even kidney failures. You don't expect by purging that you'll have things like the kidneys that fail, but that does happen with people with eating disorders, and also as well as constipation and digestive disorders. Okay. So I had one more binge eating disorder, and that's similar to other thing, and just a bunch of more stuff that I wanted to go over. I don't know if we'll do a part 2 of this. I think you guys got the message. I really do. So we'll figure out and decide. But anyways, as always, I left my board someplace. I don't know. So let's hope I can memorize this. But I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Again, guys, if you have an eating disorder of any type, please seek some type of professional help. Make sure that if you want to call somebody, call the National Eating Disorder at hotline at 1-800-931-2231. You can text them as well, or call the crisis text line, text NEDA to 741-741, and please seek the help that you need. All right, everybody, that is tonight's show. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you had a really good time. As always, follow us on our Facebook at facebook.com/Transcendental Transformation. Our YouTube's the same. Email us if you have any questions at transcendentaltransformations@gmail.com. Sign up for our newsletter at soulandspiritguide.com and get VIP access and hidden shows and special guest offers when we have guests. And as always, remember to believe in yourself, and it's not our abilities or our talents that make us who we are, but it is our choices. Thank you, and have a wonderful week.